The wind screamed across the Wyoming high plains like a wounded animal, clawing at the frozen earth, slapping snow against the windows of the abandoned wagon the cowboy had taken shelter beneath earlier that evening. Jacob Hartwell, a weather-beaten ranch hand with a patched coat and boots held together by twine, urged his exhausted sorrel mare through the storm, his eyes squinting against the fury of the blizzard. He had ridden into town that morning hoping to find work. Any work from hauling freight to breaking Mustangs, but day after day the same story met him. There simply wasn't enough to go around. So he drifted back toward his lonely winter cabin in the hills, knowing only that the night would be long, cold, and empty. But fate had other plans. Just as he rounded a ridge where the pines bowed under the weight of ice, he heard a faint, desperate cry, so thin, so fragile. It was almost swallowed by the storm. Jacob halted, muscles tensing. For a moment he thought the wind was playing tricks on him, but then he heard it again, a woman's voice, weak and barely clinging to life. He dismounted quickly, pulling his scarf tighter around his face, and pushed forward through the swirling white chaos. His boots sank knee-deep in snow as he followed the sound, until he saw a collapsed shape near the jagged rocks. It was a woman, barely conscious, pale as moonlight, her fine coat torn, her gloved hand clutching at nothing as the blizzard tried to bury her. Jacob dropped to his knees beside her, checking for breath, and felt the faintest hint of life. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms, shocked at how cold and light she felt, as if the storm had drained the strength from her. Her face was delicate, framed by long dark hair matted with frost, her boots finely stitched, her gloves too expensive for any ordinary traveler. She was clearly not from these parts. But questions could wait, survival could not. Battling the storm, Jacob carried her through the drifting snow toward his cabin 2 miles downhill. Every step burned his muscles. Every gust threatened to tear her from his grip, but through sheer determination he pressed forward. When he burst through the cabin door, half frozen himself, the warmth of the fireplace was the only welcome he needed. He laid her gently on his bed, stripping off her icy coat, rubbing her hands to restore circulation, speaking to her softly, though she could not answer. He brewed hot water, warmed blankets, and fed the flames, until the cabin glowed gold against the darkness beyond the windows. At last her eyelids fluttered. She whispered something he couldn't quite catch, then slipped back into sleep. As Jacob studied her face, he noticed something deeply unusual, embroidered. On her scarf was a crest he recognized from the newspapers, the symbol belonging to Eleanor Wilde, the mysterious millionaire who owned half the railways and mines in the region. But this couldn't possibly be her, or could it? What would a woman of wealth be doing alone in such a storm? Traveling without escort? Dressed like someone fleeing rather than journeying? Jacob shook the thought away. Whoever she was, she needed help first and answers later. He tended to her fever through the night, never letting the fire die, whispering gentle reassurances even though he had no idea if she could hear him. Hours passed. Then dawn finally touched the cabin with pale blue light. Exhausted but determined, Jacob checked her pulse again. It was stronger now. She stirred, whispering hoarsely, "Where am I?" He gave her water and explained how he found her in the storm. She listened with wide, vulnerable eyes, and though she tried to hide it, fear flickered in them. She said her name was Nora, offering no further detail. Jacob didn't pry, sensing pain behind the silence. All he knew was that he had saved the life of a stranger, and something about her presence felt like more than simple coincidence, as if the blizzard had delivered a secret straight into the heart of his lonely world. For 2 days the storm raged, trapping Jacob and the mysterious woman, Nora, as she insisted he call her, inside the tiny log cabin built from sweat, stubbornness, and years of solitude. As the fire crackled and the wind screamed against the shutters, an uneasy warmth filled the room, not just from the hearth but from something unspoken between them. Nora regained her strength slowly, sipping broth Jacob prepared, woven in blankets he had carefully dried. Her cheeks no longer ghost pale but touched with color. Yet even as she healed, her eyes remained guarded, haunted, as though carrying a burden too heavy for someone of her delicate frame. Jacob respected her silence, asking nothing about her past, though the questions burned in him. Who was she really? Why had she been traveling alone? And what danger had driven her into the jaws of a deadly blizzard? On the third night, as embers glowed like dying stars, Nora finally spoke. She confessed she hadn't been entirely truthful. Her real name was Eleanor Wilde, the territory's wealthiest heiress, whose family empire controlled mines, railroads, and more land than any rancher could dream of. Jacob froze, every instinct telling him he shouldn't even be in the same room as someone of her status, someone newspapers called the Diamond Widow, a woman whose fortune rivaled entire counties. She told him she had been traveling in disguise to escape men who wanted control of her estate, men who believed a woman had no right to run an empire. Her carriage was ambushed. She fled into the storm on horseback, but lost control and had nearly frozen to death when Jacob found her. As she revealed this truth, her voice trembled, but not from fear, from the exhaustion of bearing secrets alone. Jacob listened quietly, his weathered face hiding the storm inside him. He wanted to protest that he wasn't worthy of helping a woman like her, that he was just a poor cowboy scraping by. But Nora cut him off, insisting, "You saved me when no one else would. Not my guards, not my own fortune, you." Days passed, and though she regained her strength quickly, neither of them spoke much of her departure. A fragile peace settled in the cabin, a warmth Jacob didn't realize he'd been starved of for years. She would smile at him while stirring stew. He would repair her coat with the same care he'd give a wounded colt, and their conversations drifted into deeper waters. Dreams, regrets, hopes, and the brutal unfairness of the world. But every sunrise brought the reminder that she couldn't stay forever. When the storm finally broke, the sky clear and blue as polished glass, Nora stood near the doorway, gazing at the world beyond with a conflicted expression. Riders appeared on the horizon, loyal men from her estate searching for her. Jacob felt something inside him sink. She turned to him, eyes glossy with emotion, and whispered, "Jacob, you changed my life." She placed a small, folded deed in his hand. Land. More land than any poor cowboy could imagine owning. He tried to refuse it, but she closed his fingers around it firmly. "I'm not paying you," she said softly. "I'm giving you what you deserve. A future." Before mounting her horse, she leaned close and pressed her forehead gently to his, a silent promise hanging between them. Then with her riders, she disappeared into the distance, leaving Jacob standing in the snow, his heart burning with a hope he'd never known. Word spread weeks later. Miss Eleanor Wilde had returned to her empire stronger than ever, defeating the men who sought to control her fortune. And every rumor whispered that she often gazed westward, toward the mountains where a poor cowboy had saved her life. Jacob held on to the deed, not for the land itself, but for what it meant, that sometimes destiny arrives in the middle of a storm, hidden beneath frost and fear, carrying a truth that can change a man's entire world forever. And though their paths had parted, neither of them would ever forget the night the blizzard brought them together.